than I thought it would be, you know. I'll give you an example. I obviously operate in the corporate world and all of that. And like I said, no matter where you tread across this world, there are certain like themes that you constantly encounter, and things like race, like gender, all of those things permeate throughout different walks of life. But in my professional and corporate career, although discussions pertaining to, like, for instance, transformation in boardrooms, in management and leadership levels, in a company or in firms, in the execution of like various projects and stuff, those discussions are there. But certainly there's the emphasis of anyone within that space is in your ability and what you bring to the table, what value you bring to any sort of institution and organization. And those other things actually become periphery. So it was curious for me to step into a religious and spiritual organization that grappled with the question of racial identity and had difficulty to do it. And in many instances, discussions of that nature overshadowing the substantive task at hand and the abilities and capabilities of the resources and people you have around you to attend to the questions that situation is asking of us. So that was curious to me. And I think me being me and being very straightforward about things, I've just sort of like conducted myself in a way that speaks more to finding intelligent and purposeful solutions to what our community faces, and primarily asking myself the question almost on a daily basis, the joy and exhilaration that I feel from this process, the knowledge that's contained within this philosophy, how do I share that with everyone? And you'll notice it's not a how do I share it with white people, black people, with everyone. How do I share it with everyone? But it so happens that you, Atma, Mukhundangri, that our unique context is that we live in a place called South Africa with a population of 80% brown-skinned people who speak, there's 11 official languages, 12 if you consider sign language. So when seeking to find an answer to that question, how do we share this with everyone? Naturally, the answer to that question needs to be relevant and pertinent to the audience that I'm presenting to. And that level of openness isn't something that I've always found to be readily available sometimes.
You've served in various capacities formally in the ISKCON body. I've only cited a couple, I'd say, and I can only, feel around the possibilities of your involvement or close involvement with the Sank and the BBT. Could you tell me a bit more about those services And in parallel to that, this ghost that's kind of a hindrance in fulfilling Srila Prabhupada's mission in South Africa.
Yeah. So I initially began serving in the BBT, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, in 2011, 2012, somewhere there. And wonderful time there. I think I spent more than 10 years. My initial service was I edited the first isiZulu translation of one of Prabhupada's introductory books, Beyond Birth and Death. And that was an exciting project. And of course, I was largely brought into the service because of my spiritual master, Sonas Chaitanya Swami, who was who's been so intimately involved in Prabhupada's books right from the get-go. So it was a very natural service to slot into and do. In the BBT, there's lots of exciting things. I mean, we had the Bhaktivedanta Swami lecture, which we helped inaugurate, and we had the first, the inaugural lecture at Wits University delivered by His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. And I think the idea behind that was to present Prabhupada's books to a secular audience outside of the traditional streams of communication which we otherwise have in ISKCON. And that I think has been like really, really successful. So served in that capacity in events organization in the BBT, served in marketing, served as the liaison throughout the African continent, which was really wonderful. An exposure to different African Krishna Conscious communities. That's a whole topic on its own. There's a lot to revel about and learn from those communities as well. And then obviously served as a trustee, and final bit of service there was managing the operations in the BBT. But chapters also come to a close, and we've moved on from that. Served in a term which is coming to an end at the end of this month in the National Council. Initially, that came about as being brought in under a committee, a steering committee, to look at reformation of National Council. And reformation centered around the transformation and the representativity that we see in our governing body. And along with a team of really, really experienced and wonderful and open-minded devotees, these fresh and progressive policies of transformation were put forward to the National Council. Subsequent to that, which is something I wasn't expecting, I was asked to do service as part of the environment and sustainability portfolio for National Council, which I said only for 2 years. So hence my term coming to an end the end of this month. So that's been my involvement, limited to what it has been in my description there. These are all, I guess, what I would describe. I mean, they've been fun services. It's always really a gratifying thing to be engaged in in the service of devotees, of the community of Prabhupada. But I think it's also honest to say services of duty. There's a saying that sometimes we have to do what we need to do in order for us to also do what we want to do. So those have been needful things at these various junctures in my devotional life. And I'm grateful for the lessons and experiences and the association I've gotten from those experiences. But yeah, the core of where I'm at as a person now, as Mukhundangri, beyond the pullings of duty, comes back to the question: how do we share this message with everyone? That's what really excites me. And I think it segues nicely into that part of the question where you're talking about that ghost of South Africa's past and how it affects how we govern, how we function as a society. So I think that we certainly have well-intentioned people governing, leading, delegating, doing service and contributing to our society. That's not at question. I think what and I often say this, that we have a very closed society in terms of our openness from a cultural point of view, and our openness with respect to knowing how to package ancient philosophy in a modern age. So we're a very closed society in that respect. And you may have well-intentioned people at the helm. However, if there isn't this openness to suggestion of how we can chart a new path forward, you're still going to be weighed down by an anchor of a past that was segregational and oppressive. But you have to be open to that.
I think that takes us to Bhakti Lounge. You know, I'm thinking that's part of a bigger stage, or that's kind of like a pathway into moving into spaces or accessing spaces that can give people access to this ancient philosophy in that sense. Because as you're speaking about, you know, being a closed community, and a closed community that's also got a lot of debris in orbit, you know. I've been thinking, you know, when you're talking about one of your first services, editing Beyond Birth and Death, translating it into Zulu, one of the things that I've been mulling about in my head is how to define or express Krishna Conscious spiritual concepts in my native tongue. And that in itself has been kind of an exercise in writing poetry. because Krishna consciousness is amazing, man. It's like super poetic. So that's another thing, how to have Krishna conscious conversations in our mother tongue. That's an exercise that I've been like so thirsty for, you know. But for some reason, it never happens, or it's difficult somehow, or there's something always in the way. But that's something I really want to do.
Yeah. Inkinga atma ngikukhuluma isiZulu uzoyi-transcribe uma ufuna ukuyi-transcribe, and laba abafuna ukwazi ukuthi ngithini bazofundela isiZulu. Inkinga ukuthi inkolo ukuthi uKrishna uyasizwa masithandaza ngesiZulu, ayikho. Nakho mina yazi mase kushube kahle, hayi bhuti wami, ilimi lasekhaya ngiguqa ngamadolo ngithi uNkulunkulu, Krishna. Why? It's because it's natural. It's you see, there's so many ways to express love and devotion for Krishna. So many ways. Language is but a single part of it. There's,
sorry, not to cut you, but I've always said the variegatedness of the material world is testament to the opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you know. Yeah, and if you can't appreciate it on that level, you know, I don't think we've barely grasped to.
Yeah, there's maybe a sense of even like you can imagine in Africa alone there's more than 2,700 languages. Okay, of course there's major language groups and so on, but there's 2,700 languages just on this like continent, on this puny planet within this universe. There's that many languages. Can you imagine in the vastness of the spiritual world, the different accents and vocabularies and nuances associated with the beauty of language? And so Krishna hears all of these. Krishna, we can strike a deep sense of relationship by expressing ourselves in a way that speaks most to our heart when we refer to Krishna in that way. So language is very much a powerful tool of expression and conveyance and then connection with people. But what people often try to do is try to disassociate language with culture. And language and culture are irrevocably linked to each other. You know, George Orwell's 1984 is like such a beautiful example of how language and the cultural effect of language has on a society. And you know, there's this concept of like double speak in that book. And in double speak, basically, left is right, yes is no, all of these things, and whatever Big Brother says is the truth, even if Big Brother tells you that the sky is green, you know. So language has a very powerful effect on culture. A example of that is in many African dialects, Southern African dialects, in the Nguni languages, I'll use isiZulu as an example. We say Sawubona. Not only is that a form of greeting, if you take it exclusively from its linguistic perspective, but it implies a certain cultural value too. What is that cultural value that it's conveying? Sawubona, from the root of ukubona, as in I see you. So when you are greeting someone in this fashion, you're not only saying hello or greetings, it's I see you. I acknowledge you. And that is subtended by the ethos of Ubuntu. That's the parts of culture that are universal and so interwoven in the very culture of Krishna consciousness. So where we might grapple as an institution and as a closed society with taking these innately spiritual cultural cues to convey deep spiritual wisdom, we instead are hampered by being very specific in the cultural presentation of Krishna consciousness.
I think you've encapsulated the problem so swiftly that, the only way to do it is to do it. I think we just need to get into it, and which is something that needs to be done. I think that's part of the exercise of going deeper into Krishna consciousness in a given setting. It's unavoidable. It's something that needs to be done. But I want to talk more.
It's
about
also
Bhakti Lounge.
It's also empathy. Sorry to.
Yeah.
It's also a deep empathy. Learning languages. In fact, it's quite well documented that speaking or conversing to someone in their own language enables one to have a deeper understanding and therefore of the other person's experiences and therefore greater sense of empathy for people.
Yeah, you're taking me back to social linguistics, actually. Taking me back to that.
So,
it's like very important.
Yeah. I mean, most black people in South Africa speak at least 3, 4, 5 languages, multilinguistic, and there's a lot we can do in a society where that espouses the essence of all religiosity, is compassion and the celebration of the holy names of the Lord. That compassion element would go a long way in being fulfilled by us being more proactive in building our individual and collective muscles of empathy. By just saying, if I was to ask myself the question, how best do I spread this message to everyone? And if you feel the best way to spread it is to maybe communicate it to someone in a way that they will understand, then it is incumbent on you to try and equip yourself to articulate the message in a way that people will understand.
Definitely. You know, you're touching on to hitting a couple of notes on this internal conversation I've been having, internal dialogue, and it has to do with this compassion, you know, just dealing with and navigating some difficulties in my own spiritual path, you know. And yeah, compassion became the conclusive sounding, you know, of what the exercise of applying oneself in Krishna consciousness would amount to. The absolute realization in the material world. But that's another conversation for another day. You're kind of like pulling me to another thing. Like I said, I've been wanting to talk to you for the longest time, and there's a lot of things that I want to talk to you about. But for the sake of this interview, let's talk about Bhakti Lounge, how it came about, and what it's done and what it plans to do.
Bhakti Lounge is just I think how we initially thought. This was after graduation, so we are now like quote unquote out of the university BYS system, but as alum to these institutions, and of course the BYS structure, it was like, how do we continue to contribute post our university tenure and build an environment for young people within ISKCON to continue to learn about Krishna consciousness, establish themselves in well-grounded, sound sadhana, and construct a meaningful life within the society, a life that speaks to the human needs that we all have, the need for friendship, the need for direction, a need for guidance, all of those things that we might need in a fully fledged human life lived in Krishna consciousness. So that was the idea behind it, and I think Bhakti Lounge has had a number of like we've had like our annual strengthening our sadhana workshops, which are always very delicious. We've had like various student retreats that we've done, but in all intents and purposes, that's what it's been. And in my personal capacity as Mukhundangri, haven't necessarily found the time to like fully invest myself in that project because of the multifarious other engagements that I have. But that's essentially what the hope and dream of Bhakti Lounge Joburg was. And yeah, there's still that hope, that dream for it. There's a number of things that I'm personally applying myself to at this point in time. And I think everything has its proper timing. And it's just about coming to a point where we have the internal resources and strength to master the effort that we need to have the society that we want. So, Yongo Maharaj, Karambakanda Maharaj would say that the in-reach is many a times more important than the outreach. We need to be able to take care of ourselves, take care of each other, if we're going to be exuding the same energy of love, compassion to others outside of our community. So yeah, we're working really hard to introduce progressive thinking and elements of inclusiveness in our society.
That is needed. Tell me a bit about your aptitudes and inclinations in storytelling and theater, particularly in relation to exploring the Bhagavatam.
Yeah, so Atma, you can now throw away the last, I don't know how long we've been talking, but that's me. In school, I remember my favorite times in school was always creative writing. You get sucked into a world where you can dance in story. And story is very powerful because in many ways, in fact, you know, it's written about quite a lot, how learning is better digested through story. And that was Vyasdev's predicament after his compilation of the various Vedas. It was a sound and astute presentation, but it lacked the focused delivery of the essence, which is the soul's relationship with Krishna. And what better way to tell about the soul's relationship with Krishna through the story of these wonderful personalities who in their own right have different relationships and exchanges with Krishna. But through those experiences and relationships, they convey seminal spiritual knowledge about our own story and journey towards Krishna. That's Bhagavatam. So it excites me a lot, Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam is prana. Bhagavatam is air. You can't live without Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam is one's solace, one's shelter in the storm. Through Bhagavatam, you meet Narada Muni and his relationship with his mother, and how through trial and tribulation was finally united with the Lord, and after that moment it was taken away, but he couldn't stop thinking about the Lord. You meet Vidura, who faced so much insult, and instead of taking retribution, he saw it as an opportunity to seek after the Lord. You meet Bharat Maharaj, who was righteous and noble, but succumbed to certain material trappings about the idea of who he thought he was. And therefore, had to endure several lives after in order to realize a fully fledged relationship with Krishna. And then there's Chitraketu, a king who, despite having everything, was not happy. And only when he got given the thing that he thought was missing from his life, and that thing gets taken away, and he's brought to the realization that it is only our relationship with Krishna that is of substance and value and is actually eternal and lasting. And even though he gets cursed, this king, this righteous king, he gets cursed to become a demon in his next life, and he's hated both by the demigods and the demons at some point in time, because he holds true to that understanding that through everything, what may come and what may go, my Krishna is my everything and the center of my heart. There's all these stories from all these beautiful personalities, Lord Brahma, Mother Yashoda, the residents of Dwarka, that we can find ourselves in. Sometimes someone's struggle speaks to our struggle. And when you see that in someone, and you see how Krishna pulls them, not just out of that struggle, but towards him, you, in the pages of Bhagavatam, find faith within your struggle. So that's the power of Bhagavatam and the power of these stories. And there's a joy in sharing these wonderful stories. Bhagavatam is, like I always say, it's delicious. You can eat it all you want.
God, my mind could pour out of my eyes. Right? Yeah. Time is such a thing, and it's doing its thing right now. And I wish I had more. But unfortunately, we have to close. Mukhundangri, I've been looking for your association for the longest time, and you're like dangling the carrot right now. And yeah, you're making me want to crawl into the screen, In closing, your journaling, your podcast, where can people get access to that?
Well, I write a lot for Hare Krishna News. So if you want to read any of my articles, which many of them are inspired by various journal entries, you can read that. And we are working on a bigger project, but that's still in the pipeworks. And podcasts, we haven't recorded in a while. And it's largely due to reconciling this idea of teaching and learning, feeling like a student, and also dealing with one's own sort of like what's the term? imposter syndrome. So I always want to be authentic. So I always believe that you only speak what you can walk. So yeah, the podcasts that are there, they're there. And on Apple, on Spotify, on SoundCloud, you can find them there, Mukhunda's Meditations. And so to speak on meditation, one must meditate. So I've been meditating, and maybe there'll be something to speak about sometime soon. But there will be soon. More in the format of themed seasons with a limited amount of episodes, speaking on that theme. That's the idea that we have for the podcast now. It'll be exciting when we do eventually roll it out.
It's been very exciting and fulfilling speaking to you for past hour or so, plus some. And I hope to have more conversations and access to you like this in the coming future. Thank you very much for your time, Prabhu. I'm looking forward to all the things that you're working on. And hopefully I could find a little opening that I can, squeeze my way through to get the nectar, That will be a blessing of note. And yet again, thank you very much.
What is your advice for the young African devotee?
Have mercy on these old ones.
Actually, man. Okay. No good. It's just think. Use your mind. Be kind. Be compassionate. And don't wait to be empowered. Know that you are empowered.